Hello, everyone. I'm going to give a couple minutes for people to come in, figure out this whole breakout room thing. And I am, this is the first time I've done my own breakout session in something, so I'm hoping everything goes just fine. um, so I'll give it another moment. I'm going to try to add my email address. My computer keyboard is being a little weird, but I was going to try to add my email address in the chat room. Um, and yeah, it's not letting me do it. So that's just kind of weird. Um, yeah, give it just another minute because it looks like people.
Lori,
Yes.
Lori, you should be able to do it because I can look at it mine. Do you want me to put it in for everybody?
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, like I said, my
I don't know why
keyboard.
you can't do it, but
Well,
what's your email address?
Lori,
L
Lori
O R I
at tonaldiversions.com, and that's all one word.
Shin.com. Okay, I'll post it and tell me whether it went in right or
It's
not.
in, there just needs to be an S at diversions.
Oh,
Yeah, everything,
diversions.
yeah,
Okay.
but everything else looks good.
Yeah, tonaldiversions.com.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
did I
I
get it
think,
right that time?
yes.
Okay.
I think it's just that my tablet keyboard is just being weird because I've been having a couple issues with it, and so, but I don't think I'll need to type anything else, so we should be okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. I don't know how many people got a chance to look at or download the handout. If you didn't, that's okay. It'll be on the website. That's more for you to be able to look at later. I'll be walking through what's on the handout through this, and then yeah, and then you can keep that handout later for reference because I know for me I love having handouts so that I can remember what I learned. So I'm Lori Sutherland. I'm a librarian by day, but I'm also a composer, clarinetist, and teacher. And I hope um, that these tricks will be able to, help you get some of these runs under your fingers. And I think my computer's letting me, I think, add the handout to the chat. Let me get it in there. There we go. So it's now in the chat if you want to get it this way. I think it's also on the website, the ICA website. So yeah. So one thing we all have to deal with as clarinet players at some point in our career is the big scary run. And I don't know about you, but there are times where I look at the music and I just say nope. Um, but I'm hoping that we can get from nope to at least a okay, I can try that in this session. So the two parts to doing all of this are your notes and fingers and your speed. And we're going to focus more on the notes and fingers today. The speed ends up being fairly straightforward, but I'll still give you tips on that. So when we're playing a run, we need to know what's going on in the music. Think of it as you're driving someplace for the first time. You have to pay attention to street signs that you don't usually have to look at. You're paying attention to the traffic patterns that you're not used to. That's kind of what happens when we start learning a run. What we want to do is get the run to feel like your daily commute that you do all the time. You know how to get home. Half the time you don't even think about what turns you're making just because you know how to do it. And so that's kind of where we're trying to get with these runs to make them feel a little bit more comfortable. So I'm going to have us play. So make sure you're all muted, just because, like in the warm up session, if we all try playing with all our microphones on, it's going to sound funny. But I wanted to give you all a chance to see how this would go. Um, Let me do one thing here. I meant to turn on my uh, timer to make, because I don't want to hold us. I want to make sure we have enough
Are
time.
we supposed to have music? I don't see any music.
No, this will
Okay,
be
sorry.
yeah, there is music in the handout, but for the sake of trying to get everyone to do this, we're just going to work on a scale. So who knew that you would have a scale test today? Pop quiz on a scale. So we're going to work on our E major scale. Now I picked this one because there's some fingering stuff. It might not be second nature to everyone, and I thought this could be a good way to demonstrate what's going on with these practice techniques. So I'm going to lead us in just a quarter note. We're going to start on our shallow E, and we're only going to do one octave, and we're only going to go up for the sake of time. Now to refresh, we have 4 sharps: F, C, G, and D. It's okay if it doesn't go well this time. That's fine. So I'll give us 4, and we'll just do quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, so that may have given some challenges because we have to remember, oh, left versus right. You know, most of us have to play that D sharp with our right hand because most of us probably don't have the extra key like on the fancy clarinets. So one thing that I do, a lot of times when we work on runs, like say we're doing a bunch of 16th notes, we'll go by beat. Da 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 da. And that's a great way to work on it. But there are some other things that we can do, and I hope these are new ways for you to think about trying these runs and practicing. So I am a fan of what I call rhythm alteration and rhythm techniques. So instead of just doing straight 16th notes or 8th notes or whatnot, we're going to change up the rhythm and really force our brains and our fingers to work together. So the first one that I do is long short. So basically I swing it. So I'm going to play an example and then I'll have everyone try it with me. So I'm going to basically do 8th note, dotted 8th, 16th. So I'm just swinging that scale. I'm still taking it slow because that's a great way to do it. I'm a firm believer if you can't play it slow, you can't play it fast. So I'm gonna give us 4, and feel free to try 1 octave up with me. 2, 3, 4. So that just gives you a different way to think about things. And I think a lot of us at this point have probably played some swing, or we've played marches that have a lot of dotted 8/16 type of things. And so we're used to that rhythm. So now we're going to flip it and do short long. So that's already forcing us to think about it a little differently. So let me give us 4 and we'll come in again. 1, 2, 3, 4. So all of these, like I've said, force your brain and your fingers to work together in different ways and to really process what's going on in the music. Now, normally I wouldn't be doing this from memory. I'd normally have the passage I'm working on in front of me, and I would be reading the music as I do this. It's a little different, in this type of situation, and so I was trying to figure out the best way to do it. But I think the scales work. So the next one. So say we were trying to do a run of 16th notes. This one really starts to make your mind go a little bit, wonder what's going on, because we're going to change it into triplets. And I'll warn you now that the rhythm or the beat will not line up neatly at the end. So I'll play this one first. So let's try that one. 1, 2, 3, 4. So hopefully this is starting to get a little bit more under your fingers, even just the little bit we've been playing already. On the handout, I have several more listed, and then so let me check my time here. Okay. Because I want to make sure we have time at the end for some questions and then to be able to get back into the main session again. So the next one, I won't necessarily have you play with me, but you're welcome to kind of noodle along. I'll do 8th and 2/16. This is where it really starts to show that your beats aren't gonna line up really pretty like they would in the music. And then I'll flip that to 2/16 8. And like I said, all of these just continue to build different pathways in your brain and your fingers. The next two, and I know I'm going through this really, really fast, and that's why I wanted to give a handout to everybody so that you can go back and you don't have to be trying to write, scribble furiously some notes on this. All of these will have examples on the last page of the handout. Everything's completely written out, and so you can see what is actually going on in each of these.
Where do we get that?
There is a link in the chat, and the file itself is in the chat, or should be in the chat. It shows that it posted. And then also on the ICA website.
Which scales are you using? I mean, you said 4 sharps. I don't even know that scale.
Oh yeah, so sorry, I was doing the
Trying to find it.
It's R written E, so concert D, depending on how your scale book is.
It's D?
Well, it's concert D, but R written clarinet E major should have 4 sharps in it.
4 sharps is E major.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, part of the reason I picked E is because I suspected that, that one not as many people would be as comfortable with as just our regular C major scale. And it can really hopefully show what, what's going on with these exercises. So the next one, I'm not going to have you all play with me just because this goes further into the mind bending part of it. And this one is a lot easier when you have the music that you're practicing in front of you. So the next one is I call the 5-note shift. So you start and you play notes 1 through 5, and then you play 2 through 6, and 3 through 7, etc. I like this because it really covers all the transitions between the beats. Because typically when we're doing by beat, it's 1 through 4, 5 through 8. We're doing them in groups of 4. By doing them in groups of 5, then we get to progress through this entire run. So here's an example of that same scale. And that exercise is so much easier to do when you have your music in front of you, because then you can really pay attention to, okay, what note am I starting on next? What exactly are notes 4 through 9 or whatever on that. Um, and so that's another reason why I'm not making you play this one with me, because it's just easier when you have your music in front of you. And the last one for the rhythm techniques this is where it gets kind of crazy, and you really start to truly know this run backwards and forwards. And I actually call this one back and forth. And so you're going to do another group of 5, and you're going to go back and forth. Etc. And it seems counterintuitive to play something backwards. It really does. But I truly feel that it helps. And it helped me, this technique really helped me on a nasty run that I had to learn. And so I do believe it can help. This one does take a lot of concentration as you're playing it to figure out where you're going and then having to come back through the music. But it really forces you to know what those notes are, because you're really concentrating on, oh, this is next. So those are the rhythm techniques. And sometimes you only need to use 1 or 2 of them, and the run will already feel better. There have been runs that I have used all of these, and then I continue to make up other ones that are going to help. It all depends on what you feel you need to work on. And that's one thing I love about this, is that it's so flexible, because you can tailor it to what music you're trying to work on at that moment. And, if it's an easier run that you just have a little bit of trouble with, well, just try a couple of these and see if they help. But don't, you don't necessarily have to do everything. So with the whole fingers and note familiarity, sometimes I will memorize a run. Even if I'm not going to perform it that way, I feel like by memorizing it, that just hammers home even more what notes come next. And so that's something to consider doing as an additional aid. So I think before I get into the speed part, I think I have time for some questions. Feel free to unmute or type in the chat, because I know I just threw a lot at you.
I always panic when I see the run and then can't move.
Yes, and I'm with you on that, because there have definitely been times, especially when sight reading, but even sometimes later on, when I feel like, oh, I should know this better. And that's another thing I like about this practice, because it really gets me so much more comfortable with what's coming, where I might still have that little bit of, oh no, that part's coming up, but it makes me feel more confident that I'll be able to get through it. And just being able to take some dedicated, smart practice time to work on those isolated spots, hopefully will give you a confidence boost so that you don't feel like you're going to freeze up. Smoothing out over the break. I just saw it. Sorry, and okay. So one of the big things I will do, well, a few things. When I'm able to keep my right hand down, or even parts of my right hand down, that will help. And then air. Make sure your air continues to keep flowing over that break, because we have a natural tendency for our air to drop. both when we're going over the break and when we're doing like a large jump or something like that. So keep that air going as much as you can. Use the right hand down, because you can play A and keep your right hand down. You can play B flat. I mean, really, any of these throat tones, G sharp, A, and B flat, you can generally keep your right hand down, especially in fast passages. And so then, yes, a question. Oh, but yes, also keep the air going. That's Air is so vital to what we do. The more you can keep your air going just all the time, I think it really does help our playing. So yes, start slowly and get faster. I do that, and in a minute we'll talk more about speed, because yeah, that's the second part of all this, is getting it up to speed. It's one thing to get your fingers used to where they're going. It's another thing to play it as fast as it needs to go. So B, C sharp, and D sharp. Aha. So I'm hopefully you can clarify if I'm misunderstanding, but I'm thinking that you're talking about in the scale we just played. So the scale we just played, once we get up to B, you have to use your right hand B, alternate to your left hand C sharp, and then come up to right hand D sharp. So the more you can alternate fingers, the smoother that's going to be. Moving the C sharp on the left. Ooh, that's a good question. I think I try to not go too far with my pinky, but that is a natural tendency. Depending on your individual instrument and your individual hand, that might just take some dedicated practice, and it might be worth it to go from B to C sharp just to get some of that motion and feel how these are staying on the keys. There is a chance that you might be able to get your clarinet slightly adjusted to make that easier, because I've had that done on similar things done on other instruments. So let me talk a little bit about speed to make sure we get this in here, because we have a few minutes left. So yes, start slowly and get faster. That's something I do a lot. And it can be tedious, and there are going to be times where I feel like I got it to a certain point and then it all fell apart. That's okay. That's normal. It happens to all of us, and it's not a bad thing when that happens. So don't let yourself get too discouraged with that. And sometimes it means you just have to set it aside for a day or two. But there does come a point where, say you get a run up to 120 and it's doing okay, but as soon as you move that to 121, it all falls apart. I've more recently become a fan of fast but chunked practice. So what I'll do is I'll break down my passage into smaller chunks, sometimes just even 2 notes worth, and try to do just that little bit at tempo. And then start adding back in. Either it's, by note, do the first 2 notes, then the first 3 notes, and that can work. You can also do it by beat. That's really dependent on the passage and what part is giving you trouble. So for the scale we just played, say that we're doing that B, C sharp, D sharp, E, and that's the part that's really giving you trouble. I might do just a couple notes at a time, and then add another one, and feel how that's going. And so I really will break it down, but I'll try to go fast, if that makes sense. Because I feel like even though the slow to fast practice is a really good thing to do, and I still do that a lot, a lot of times I feel like there's a plateau that happens, and you need to get yourself past that plateau, and just raising the metronome by another beat per minute isn't gonna help. So yeah, I will try to do just short little bursts. And that's another spot where you'll feel like you get something, and then the next time you go to practice, it'll feel like you learned nothing. And that's okay. I just want to keep re-emphasizing that, because practicing can get frustrating, and and that's okay. And it's then okay to take a break. It's okay to come back. It's okay to try to tackle it in a different way. I also encourage a lot of try making up your own exercises. Okay, 2-minute warning on this. So try making up your own exercises. Sometimes that's the best thing you could do, because it's so dependent on the run you're trying to practice. And be patient with yourself. And that's something I have to practice as well, because I get mad at myself for not getting something quicker than I should. And so be patient with yourself, be willing to take a break, but keep persevering. So in the minute and a half we have left, does anyone have any other questions?
Oh, I just put something in the chat about, you said something in your handout about memorizing pieces to go faster. And if you do that, then how do you do that?
Oh, well, my memorization, I'm usually just memorizing like that little treble section. And that usually I'm able to do fairly quickly, because it's usually only just a couple measures. So I don't have too many specific tips on that, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm really just typically memorizing that tiny little passage that's giving me trouble, just to further cement, okay, this is what note comes next. If I'm keep forgetting that, oh no, it should be a D sharp instead of a D, trying to memorize it can really reinforce that, yes, it is a D sharp. So yes. And then the question about the handout, it should be linked in the chat, but it is also linked on the ICA webpage, I believe, for this event. And I think Jessica will probably mention something at the end as well. So thank you all for being here. I hope these tips help you. I would love to hear from you, so feel free to email me. My email's on the handout. So I think we're 22 seconds left. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Fully introduce myself now. I'm Lori Sutherland, and I'm a librarian by day, but I'm also a composer, clarinetist, and teacher. And I hope that the tips I have for you today will help you conquer some of these runs, because in all our clarinet playing, it's something we've all had to deal with, is we have to deal with the big scary run, and we turn the page in our music and we see this big scary run, and we often just say nope. And so I'm hoping to turn that nope into a, okay, I might be able to do this. And we do that by practicing in a smart fashion. I think a lot of times we tend to just try to do it by brute force. And we just keep playing the whole run at tempo, over and over, hoping that something finally clicks. Well, there's ways we can break it down to make that work better. So the first, sorry, I'm looking at my time here, because I have a lot that I'm going to throw at you. And so that's going to happen. I will try to take a moment about midway through, so that, I can answer questions and give you a chance to question and comment. So there's two parts to learning runs. The first is the notes in your fingers. The second part is speed. The notes in your fingers, when you first start with this tricky passage, I equate it to driving somewhere for the first time. You're looking at maps, you're paying more attention to the street signs, you're having to pay more attention to the traffic pattern, and it's a lot of information, and so you're not as confident and smooth in going to this new destination. Well, I want to turn this run from a new destination into your normal commute where, oh, of course I know how to drive home from work, and I know exactly where I'm going, and I don't have to pay attention to what street sign is next. So that's kind of the familiarity we want to get with these runs. First, one way we usually practice, if it's a group of 16th notes, we'll break it down into beats and do, beat 1 and beat 2 and beat 3, which is a great way to do it, and I do that a lot. There are techniques beyond that, though. So this is where I definitely ask and make sure everyone is muted, because I'm going to invite you to get your instruments back out. And for this, usually I would be looking at music because I'm trying to learn this run. For today and the purposes of this class, I'm going to try leading us through our E major scale. E is an elephant. And we'll start on Shallow E, and it has 4 sharps. And I'm picking this scale because it might not be automatically under everybody's fingers. And I want to make this a bit of a challenge so that hopefully, you can feel the progress of the tips I'll show you. So we're just going to do quarter notes, 1 octave going up. So remember, our sharps are F, C, G, and D. So I will count us to 4 and 1 octave going up in quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hopefully most of you were able to get most of that. So now, instead of just doing chunks, each beat at a time like we usually would, I like to do what I call rhythm techniques. So we're going to take this same run, in our case a scale, and we're going to change the rhythm up. This is going to force our brains and our fingers to make new connections and to concentrate on what notes we're playing. So the first one I like to do is basically turn it into swing or a long short pattern. So I will demonstrate, and then I'll let you play with me. So that's all I'm doing. I'm just turning it into a swing, nice and slow. It does not have to be fast yet. Articulation at this point doesn't really matter too much. So if you want to slur it, that's fine. If you want to tongue it, that's fine. So I'll give us another count of 4, and then we're going to try to swing this. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that one should be pretty straightforward for everyone. I think in a lot of our playing, most of us have done either some jazz tunes or like with, if not in a jazz band, with our community bands or New Horizons, or we've done marches, which do dotted 8/16 a lot. So that should be more of a familiar one, and it's a nice way to ease into these different patterns. So now we're going to flip-flop it and do short, long. So let me demonstrate that. So that already is going to start making you think a little bit more. So I'll give us a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So even sometimes with some runs that aren't quite as bad, but I still need to get under my fingers, I'll just do those 2 a little bit, and that helps solve my problems. But sometimes I need to go further and really continue to dissect this run. So now I'm going to try triplets. So I'll demonstrate that one. Now you'll notice the your beat doesn't line up so much anymore at the end, and that's okay. You're just trying to get these different patterns, so don't feel like you have to make it end on a beat or something like that. So let's try the triplets. 1, 2, 3, 4. And hopefully it's already starting to feel a little bit more under your fingers at this point. And again, sometimes, this is all the farther I need to go. Now the next ones I will just demonstrate. I mean, you're all muted, so if you want to play around, that's fine too, but I'm not going to specifically lead us in it. So then I'll try 1/8 and 2/16. And then I'll flip-flop that. So this helps emphasize different parts of this run and emphasize different connections as you're going between the notes. So those are pretty much all kind of in the same category of rhythm and how you're manipulating the rhythm. The next ones are where it really starts to get crazy. And all of these are referenced and written out on the handout. So I made sure that I did a page of music that has all of these different rhythms written out with the same passage so that you can see what's happening in there. So the next one is, I call the 5-note shift. So you'll play notes 1 through 5, then 2 through 6, then 3 through 7, etc. Etc. And this, I like this one because it bridges between the beats. Because if we just do a typical 16th note, 4 beats at a time, that can be great, but in that case, going between A and B, you're not getting that transition when you focus by beats. So I like to do that one. And then the last rhythm technique is where, the 5-note shift can be mind bending, and that's where it helps that you're actually looking at the music you're practicing, so you can pay attention to what note you're starting on next. And the same goes with this one. I call it back and forth. So you're basically learning this forwards and backwards in chunks. So I'm still going to do 5 notes at a time, but I'm also going to come backwards. And it may seem counterintuitive to come backwards through a run, but I really feel it helps. I can't explain the psychological and other reasons why it works, but I feel like that has really helped me in some things. I had a really nasty run that I had to learn recently, and that one really cemented what notes came next and really helped me with that. So the last bit of finger and note is sometimes I will take that little snippet that I'm learning and I'll memorize it, even though I'm not planning to do any performing that way, especially if I'm playing in community band or something. We're not playing by memory. But memorizing that little run that you have to do can really reinforce, hey, this is what comes next in the piece. It really is a D sharp next as opposed to a D natural type of thing. And so don't discount, the role of memorization. And so I just threw a lot of information at you. And I want to take just a couple minutes that if you have a question, you can either unmute yourself or you can pop it in the chat. And I want to give us a few minutes just to be able to talk. And I need a sip of water.
Lori,
Mhm.
you didn't talk about the metronome at all,
We will
and I
get
thought you were going to.
well, we'll get to that a little bit in this next part for
Oh, okay.
with speed, yeah. So the first part is really just getting to know what notes are next, because I'm a firm believer that if you don't know what's coming up next and you are always surprised by what the run contains, then you'll never be able to play it fast. Because if you are always having to refamiliarize yourself with the notes in the passage, then that takes up too much brain power. And so we need to get our brain and our fingers working together without our conscious interfering. And I feel like that's when we can bridge into speed. Now, it can help sometimes to do the metronome when you're doing this practice with the rhythm technique. But it's okay to do it slow.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I once had somebody give advice that tonguing and slurring alternately helps familiarize you with the notes and the
Oh,
passage and with speed.
that
Have you?
yeah, I haven't specifically heard that, but I can see where, yeah, I would agree with that, that playing around with your articulation can also help just reinforce what's in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that.
I'll tell her.
Lori,
Hmm.
I also play in a community band, and I feel like with new music, they start they start too fast for me. So I'm not at that speed as yet. So what do I do then in the practice session with with a community band?
That part of just of being a musician is knowing when we should sit out until we're ready to come back in and join. Um, so I've done that in my own ensembles. If all of a sudden it's getting to a spot that's too fast for me to go at that moment, I will just rest until I can come back in. I know that's not always feasible depending on how many people are playing each part, and so sometimes they're I just try to power through best I can, but it's yeah, in the sight reading, that's another that could be a really good session to have for one of these workshops, is sight reading and how to deal with that stuff when it's still really new to everybody. And like I said, the main thing I do is I just kind of sit out if I can, and then come back in like a couple measures later when things have calmed down.
But studies have shown that if once you take the instrument off your face, your chances of getting back in are next to nothing. You have to keep focused, just play on a downbeat, however many downbeats you can, and then jump back in when it gets easier or when all of a sudden you're
Yes, that works too. You do still have to be focused on what the music is doing, even if you're not actively playing it. You have to still be counting and be aware and at least following along at what's going on. And I do also like the suggestion of playing a downbeat, etc., and that can help. So I did notice in the chat, yes, you don't always need to start at the beginning. And that's something I'll do. Sometimes I'll work backwards through a run and do like beat 4, then beats 3 and 4, then 2, 3, and 4, etc. To try to 3 minutes. Oh no. So speed. Sorry, I need to get this in there. I do a lot of slow to fast with metronome work, but then sometimes I will jump ahead and try to do things at speed, but in small chunks. So like with the scale, I'll do something like 3 notes at a time. And try to play those at speed, and then maybe add another note. And try to really chunk it down and build. I'm a big fan of breaking things apart and putting them back together. And so sometimes, like if I'm having problem with the last bit of that scale, I'll try to just focus on that little bit, but playing it fast. And I do cover a little bit. It's not in huge detail, but I do go over that a little bit in the handout. So I feel like it's a two-pronged approach. There's the use the metronome, keep ticking it up, but then I feel like there's a plateau that I hit, and then I really just have to start putting it closer to tempo, if not at tempo, and just start practicing things faster but smaller chunks. And yes, someone did say to play it backwards. Yeah, that does help. For me, changing rhythm, I feel is more effective for me than changing articulation, but I may have to start also playing more with changing articulation, because it really just is forcing you to really focus on what you're playing and when and what notes are next. And, even just making up your own exercises can be a great tool too, because each passage is going to be different on what things are vexing you. So feel free to play around and adapt these techniques to other things, in other ways. And let's see, I think I'm caught up on the chat, and I can't see our countdown timer anymore, but I hope these tips help. Like I said, I know I threw a lot at you. So I hope the handout works, and feel free to email at any time. And we have 20 seconds left. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
for coming. I really appreciate it.